So look. Right, before you at me, okay? I was already recording video, so I didn't jump in. I've been recording a bit of a series today. Um, just basically about new heroes and who's gonna play it. So, for all of you who don't know me, I am Steelfur, of Steelfur Speaks slash Steelfur Supremacy slash my general channel where I just talk about stuff. I'm a London-based flesh and blood player with lots of thoughts, lots of opinions, and I like making competitive focused content. But I do sometimes like to just talk about the market and the game because it is relevant to me as someone who likes to talk about getting new players into the game and the competitive scene to understand where we are in terms of how easy is it to get content, how easy is it to get products, how easy is it, how easy is it for new players to get into this game. So whenever they out of print a set, that is a relevant discussion for me to have as part of that matrix. And wow. So we've seen Crucible of War go out of print. Okay, lots of staples in Crucible of War, lots of confusion there. We've also seen Arcane Rising now go out of print, which is actually a really big deal. Arcane Rising is one of the first two sets that the LSS put out. It is home to these four heroes, two of which are very popular in the CC meta. Well, yeah, no, these two. Yeah, two of these which are very popular in the CC meta, one of which is very popular by himself, and one is a bit naff. And also, it's like the set that first introduced arcane damage, and the set that first sort of brought around the concept of a lot of these new classes and how they were going to work. So, out of printing Arcane Rising is a big deal, but it's not a super huge big deal. Okay, and we're going to talk about why in a second. Okay, so Viserai is probably the only reason that Arcane Rising going out of print is a big problem. Okay, because he's the only hero I would say that massively relies. I guess Dash does a little bit on a huge amount of cards from Arcane Rising, whereas like Dash is relying on Induction Chamber a lot. The boost cards could be other boost cards, new boost cards, and the Purifier comes from Crucible. Viserai is like, okay, he's running Mortar Tide, he's running stuff like that, but a lot of Viserai's new power cards have actually come with Crucible and with Arcane Rising. Oh, hey, Doza, how's it going? So, like, Arcane Rising is an odd one to take out of print because it is an introduction to a lot of the heroes and gameplay mechanics here. Okay, but there's a reason that it's not an odd set to take out of print, and that is kind of down to Azalea and Kano, right? Kano is a hero that a lot of people do not think is particularly good for the game because he deals this unblockable arcane damage. And Azalea is a ranger that really just wasn't designed very well and doesn't really have an effective way to push forward her strategy, and is, to be honest, just not as good as Lexi, right? These two heroes are considered quite good and are doing very well, so those are going to be a bit missed, especially now where Viserai is actually just coming into his own as a hero and has been doing well. We saw Matt Rogers playing him at the Calling. We saw Hamish, who I've just interviewed actually for a video on Viserai, playing it at the UK Nationals and doing very well with it there. So, Viserai is going to really miss the cards from Arcane Rising. But the important thing to understand is that there are a lot of Arcane Rising boxes still out there. The set has been printed now for about 2 years. There is a lot of it out there, right? So the singles for the set are actually really low, bar a few specific examples. Command and Conquer, Art of War, and of course, the lovely Skullcap. So, they put Arcane Rising out of print. You are going to be able to get your commons, your rares, your super rares for Viserai and Dash and Azalea and all those things for ages, right? I guarantee, the only one you're going to have problems finding is Plunder Run, right? Because everyone wants like 9 of those for all of their different decks. Every other like card is actually going to be really easy to get on the secondary market. What are the cards that aren't going to be easy to get? Plunder Run, some of the Majestics, Arcanite Skullcap, the Legendaries. Okay, we've already seen that a lot of the Legendary cards have been superseded by new Legendaries for the class, right? Who's playing Skullbone Cross Wraps anymore when you can play New Horizon? Who is playing... well, no one's playing Kano, so Storm Shriners, it doesn't really matter. And the other two are still very good. But my point is, in all of this, there is a smaller and smaller number of cards from Arcane Rising that are relevant. And those cards consistently are in the higher legendary slots and could very easily be reprinted in a supplemental set in order to keep getting them into players' hands. Specifically, we're going to talk about Command and Conquer and Art of War, because those are cards that are already hard to get, along with Skullcap, because the drop rate in an Arcane Rising box for a Majestic isn't actually that fantastic. So in order to win when opening a box of Arcane Rising, you have to hit A, C, and C. If you don't, then you lose money, which is why people aren't opening those boxes. It's why there's not a huge amount of arbitrage on the set, because essentially there's not a very good motivation for single sites to actually gamble with Arcane Rising, because the majority of the Majestics and the other cards are actually really bad value. If you pull a Stormstriders in a case instead of pulling a Grasp of the Arknight, if you pull no Command and Conquers and a Stormstriders, you've actually probably just lost about 200 quid, which is why no one is opening them en masse to get these skullcaps and things out of them, and why the price of skullcap and CNC continues to rise. The other point is, of course, because everyone needs 3 of them, because CNC is probably the best card in the game and slightly broken, you can't guarantee that you're going to be able to find those. You can't even guarantee they're going to be able to available to purchase, because let's face it, you know, every player needs 3. For every competitive player that joins the game, 3 more Command and Conquers need to be opened. Right? That metric just doesn't really work at the Majestic rates that drop in Arcane Rising. Now, in something like Tales of Aria, where the Majestics are dropping 8 a box instead of 2 or 3, the metrics start to be a lot better. It's a lot easier to get a playset of a Tales of Aria or a Monarch Majestic than it is to get a playset of Arcane Rising Majestics. So if we saw Command and Conquer reprinted in the new set along with Skullcap, we know Skullcap is being reprinted, then we could start to talk about the fact that it's okay for Arcane Rising to go out of print. As it currently stands, it's not, because people need Command and Conquer, right? But there's so much Arcane Rising out there, there's still going to be a lot opened over the next 2 months. We'll see. I do think people will rush to buy out those boxes. That's not that surprising. We do see here we have the code for maybe the next set, but at least one of the sets. There's a bit of speculation as to what this is. I've heard good suggestions that this is related to the Everfest Carnival. And it could be the battle for Everfest or something like that. I have my own theories about the next set involving the heroes from Monarch coming into Aria. And if you look at the lore of Aria, there's this whole thing about how the flow creates matter from immaterial, so kind of like a Berkeleyan, noumena concept where the world is created by perception of it. And if that is the case, then someone like Prism and Chain coming into someone like Aria could find a way to manifest their heralds and their demons from the flow that creates Aria and use that to invade the area. Because I think the heralds and Prism's light people are actually evil as well. So I'm not really sure how that's going to play out, but I could easily understand that the enemy reaches the base of the Everfest Carnival, which of course is at the base of Korshem, which is the heart of all Aria, and then we get the battle for Everfest or something like that. Someone else has also suggested it could mean Evergreen, which I think is a pretty good suggestion. There could be an Evergreen supplemental set coming out that just provides support for all of the classes and gets an update every now and then. So we could have Evergreen 2022, which would be the set that has Skullcap, CNC, E-Strike, Art of War, classes for all of the current 9 cards for all the current 9 classes in. So you know that you can buy boosters of Monarch and boosters of Evergreen and then get a good deck with some cards to put in from both. And then they'll reprint that set in 2022 with additional cards for the new classes in, but the same staples like Command and Conquer, CNC, etc. And then do that until someone rotates out or it stops being feasible, and maybe have some sort of rolling thing there. I don't know, but that could be an interesting suggestion as well. So there's a lot of things that this could mean to us. I kind of wanted to just jump on and say, the world isn't ending because they're out of printing Arc. It is a bit tricky already to find cards like Command and Conquer and things like that. I would expect them to be reprinted, so don't panic too much if you haven't yet got your playset. Also, they are very good, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have one. You can play 3 other cards that attack for a lot of damage that will still be quite good. There are heroes that don't necessarily rely on Command and Conquer as much as others, and really are just putting them in for the Prism matchup, and you could put in something else. There's lots of different options available to you there. The Skullcap is the one I think, some heroes are already starting to get a viable replacement for Skullcap. Not everyone is. And I think as long as Skullcap remains the default, it does need to be reprinted, and we're likely to see it reprinted in this new set, much like Tunic was in Crucible, basically giving you an option to have a Skullcap that is like 80 or 90 pounds and drops from this new set, which people are going to be opening for the new cards. That's my initial thoughts. I hope you found this interesting. I certainly do find it interesting that they out of printed Arcane Rising rather than WTR. But I think that we can accept that two of the heroes from this are kind of like a miss for new players. And in fact, all of the heroes in Arcane Rising are kind of a miss for new players, whereas all of the heroes in WTR are really solid for new players. And we've also seen 3 of these receive, new heroes that rely on some of the cards from these sets. So, it's kind of a good idea to keep this in print for a bit longer, as long as we have, Bolton and Oldhim and Levia. We kind of need these cards around. Whereas, Runeblade and Ranger have been reprinted, but it's not as many. And the WTR classes that I still expect, and I really do actually expect, as my final thought on this, that WTR heroes should actually get new revised starter decks made for them, which feature more of their specialization and majestic cards that come with a sort of ready-to-play 60-card starter deck. Maybe has, maybe not the legendary, but maybe the majestic from Crucible in. Basically is like maybe a £20 or £30 entry point, which isn't as cheap as a Blitz deck, but gives you a really solid like Dorinthia, Katsu, Bravo, Rhinar list to actually dive into CC. And I think that would do a lot to help get new players into the game, because they're like, how do I get into the game? What's the product I need to get into this game? And I actually feel like a starter deck, a proper starter deck, because the Welcome to Race starters were a joke, and the Blitz, because they had like 2 rares in, and obviously they were really short printed, so you couldn't even get one. There was only 10,000 of each of them. The Blitz decks are really good for getting new players into the game. I know several people who said, "Hey, I got into the game. I just bought 2 Blitz decks. I'm just playing it at home," and that's what we're doing. I'm doing it with my wife, partner, girlfriend, friend. We're just trying the game out. Seems really fun. And the Blitz decks are really doing, but I think there is a slot for either new Blitz decks for these heroes or a revised CC starter deck for these heroes. And that's one of the reasons I think Welcome to Wraith might be sticking around. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for everyone who's joined in to listen to this video. I know it was short notice. I didn't share it on streams or anything. I was kind of curious how many of you would jump in and chat to me. Marcelin, I'm not really sure. Like, Grasp is so useful and so strong. I would be really surprised if they didn't find a way to reprint it. And that's really what it comes down to. I think if you leave a set in print, you kind of have to leave the money cards alone, because otherwise there's no incentive for someone to open the set to look for a specific rare. Like, if CNC was reprinted and Grasp was reprinted and Arc was still in print, then it would make no sense, because no one would ever open Arcane Rising. But the second you put Arcane Rising out of print, then all of the options that you couldn't do before become available to you, because people will be opening the new set for the power cards that they're putting in, for the new classes, for all this other stuff. And that means that you can add in something like a Grasp without worrying too much about people opening them, right? If you add CNC to the new set, the price will drop massively for CNC, but also, I'm sorry that you bought a meta card that cost you £60 a card. I paid 50 for my CNCs each, I think, or was it 40? I'm sorry that you bought a meta card to compete. I've been telling people for a long time that, only buy CNC if you need it for a competitive deck, because I think it will be reprinted. And I'm sorry that you paid £60 for a card that's now worth a tenner, or however much the Majestics are worth from Aria. It is worth noting that, like, there are no good Majestic generics in Aria, so I still don't think CNC will be worth £10 if it gets reprinted. I still think it'll be worth around 20 or something like that. But if the drop rate is higher, then more people can get the card. Otherwise, to be honest, if you out of print Arcane Rising and you don't reprint CNC, CNC needs to get banned, right? That's kind of like the hot take that I might end this video on. Though I would like a Runeblade Secret Lair. Give me alt arts for loads of Runeblade cards. I will pay for those, especially if they're Runeblade. If they're the Viserai Runeblade cards done with Briar art, I'm totally there. I'm tired of seeing rune chants and Sutcliffs and all that stuff with purple when I want green plant shit. But my point is, right, so if you don't reprint CNC, you probably have to ban it. You can't have an out of print set that has a staple that's that good in the game. That's just not healthy. Because again, we're talking about how you get new players into a game here. And I'm always evaluating, whenever I hear any of these decisions, what's a new player going to think about that? How is a new player going to respond to this? And how is that new player hearing about it going to think, okay, what do I do? And let's be honest, if you've got a new Magic player from competitive Magic coming into the game, looking at what do I need to build a competitive deck, and they're looking CNC out of print, £100 a card, they're going to be like, what the hell is going on here? Why is a staple from what is essentially standard, because there is no rotation, so all of these sets are standard list. Why is a card from standard out of print to the extent that I can't actually get it? And remember, it is worth £100 or something if you can find them to buy. In the UK, you cannot find Command and Conquers to purchase, right? Unless you're willing to go way above whatever the price is on TCG Player, because people just haven't been opening that much Arcane Rising. There just aren't that many CCs around, and everyone who is a serious player already has 3, and they're not selling them. So, something will happen, and, I think it will either get reprinted or it will have to be banned. I'm not going to cry if it gets banned. I've been playing it for like 8 months. Will I be annoyed that I spent £60 on a card? I think it could have some impact on, let's face it, people have already said about Flesh and Blood, why am I spending so much money on this game if the cards don't have longevity? And that's why I think it will be reprinted rather than banned, because if you reprint it, then the first edition version still has value, the Unlimited Arc version still has value as a collector piece, it will still have value as a card because it's playable in decks, it will still be available. And also, to be honest, I think CNC provides a valuable tool in the aggro versus aggro matchups where you're actually forcing people to block and making them make that decision that they need their arsenal more than their cards. And I think if you don't have that in the game, in some form, or if it's class locked to, Bravo or Oldhim with Disable and Mulch, you actually are missing a key piece of interactivity, which is, dealing with the arsenal and removing a threat from the arsenal, right? And we already see that CNC isn't necessarily played into every single game, but there are some heroes like Combo Bolton, like Rhinar, Bravo and Katsu to an extent, and even Lightning Briar, who really just rely on their arsenal to set up these huge turns, and without CNC you can't interact with them. So it's a very important card for the game to have, and I think that's kind of the end. This quickly turned from Arc is out of print into what do I think about CNC and should they reprint it, chat? But I hope you're all okay with that, and I'm going to go to bed because it's starting to get late here. Have a great day wherever you are, and hopefully I will see you soon on one of my videos. And of course, if you are liking what I'm doing, please do feel free to like and subscribe the video. I also do have a Ko-fi page for people who want to support me more, but I'll leave that up to you guys. Have a great evening.